My family comes from Varanasi, from the ghats of the Ganges, but I actually grew up in a boarding school in Dehradun called Willems, so I'm really from Willems. I studied in Delhi. I did my graduation in BCom honors and did a postgrad in mass communication. And then from there directly I came to Bombay, and I was very lucky to have a job with Mr. Mahesh Bhatt on day one itself. So I was his assistant for some time, and I really learned a few things there. And then thereafter, I actually really did train myself a little bit while I was in the industry for writing, and then the career of writing began.
What attracted you to mass com?
Interesting question. I think firstly rebellion because it was the not the most done thing in my times. Everybody was either studying for IAS or an MBA. I just wanted to do something different, and that was the upcoming industry, and not too many people knew about it. I just thought it was very exciting to be able to do something that went that far and wide.
Then in Bombay, anything in your childhood which prompted you towards writing?
Yes, actually, in that sense, I have been writing since I was in class 1. That would make it, 4 or 5 years old. So I've always been writing per se, more poetry, later prose. Always lived in a slightly fanciful world, had imaginary friends, largely dogs, and wrote about them, wrote to them. So yes, in that sense, the creative was always a part of what I did. Like for example, was the editor of a school magazine, wrote a lot of plays and things like that in college. So yes, in that sense, writing was a part. But just professionally and formally, I didn't really know that or think at that point that I was going to make it a profession. So that really did happen to me a lot later, and just organically, I guess. Cinema, again, it's always a slightly longer answer I have to give on this, because I think I was almost born with, and grew up with cinema. I used to live in a small town called Gorakhpur in UP, where the only entertainment was cinema. And my parents were film freaks, and they still are. Used to watch, one film every night and 2 on Sundays. And so from the age of 6 months, I believe I was taken to the cinemas, and I was very riveted by the moving picture. And it's an anecdote that I sometimes share, is that I was such a filmy child and so not interested in studies, that the only way my mother got me to study was that she got a film fair, and she taught me as A for Amitabh uncle, B for Bobby, C for Chintu uncle, D for Dumbo uncle, etc. So then I think ironically that was the sort of foundation of my education. So where else would I go? This is at Jamia Millia Islamia. There's something called MCRC, Mass Communication Research Center. It is in fact Asia's premier institute for mass comm, because it's the only one which offers a degree. It's an MA in mass comm. So that's really very rare and sort of a very all-round kind of institute. So the focus was on various things like traditional entertainment, which was street theatre or radio, or even media appreciation, where you learn to critique a film. So unfortunately, writing per se was never a course out there. It just became part of filmmaking, which was really just one of the courses there. And so while I majored in direction, which is the last thing that you learn in your second year, it just sort of insidiously was part of the whole thing. But no, there was no formal education in writing then.
What attracted you to mass com?
Interesting question. I think firstly rebellion because it was the not the most done thing in my times. Everybody was either studying for IAS or an MBA. I just wanted to do something different, and that was the upcoming industry, and not too many people knew about it. I just thought it was very exciting to be able to do something that went that far and wide. And then from there directly I came to Bombay, and I was very lucky to have a job with Mr. Mahesh Bhatt on day one itself. Actually, I already had a few friends who were working with Plus Channel, which was headed by Mr. Amit Khanna then, which was already a place where they were always looking out for and encouraging raw and fresh talent. So I just happened to call up, and was just luckily got through to Amit Khanna instantly, and he called me for an interview that evening. And I just, walked into the room where there was Mr. Bhatt. I still remember I just peeped in, and he asked me to come in, and he said, the only question he asked me was that, are you good? And cocky me just said, no, I'm brilliant. And he said, that's great, you're on. And that's that. That was the beginning of my job. And I was just really stunned because I was like, that's it. And he was like, that's it. And then, it didn't even stop there because my next question was, how much money am I going to get paid? And he just laughed and said, come back tomorrow and you will know. So that's really how it happened. It just, I came with no ideas, and I had no idea about Bombay whatsoever. So there were no expectations, there were no apprehensions. It was just, out there, blank page. And I just gave it a shot, and it happened. So I was his assistant for some time, and I really learned, a few things there. And then thereafter, I actually really did train myself a little bit while I was in the industry for writing, and then, the career of writing began. So immediately after Mr. Mahesh Bhatt, I joined Mr. Anupam Kher's TV company as a creative director, and I just started off as a writer-director myself, and I wrote and directed about 5 shows for television, and I was creative head on about 9 other shows that we had, including events like all the award shows, Screen Awards, Filmfare, etc., etc. So there was all one just plunged into the big bad ocean without again thinking too much about it. So in a sense, I learned on the job. And thereafter, I switched careers just slightly by actually heading a few companies. So I was heading Channel V after that, was a programming head. Then I was the head of a website company. And then last, sort of corporate job of mine was the International Creative Director of Press Communication. And all of this was in the first 4-5 years of my career. So in that sense, I grew up professionally really fast at some point. But somewhere around, I think it was 2001 or 2002, I just felt that this wasn't the route I wanted to follow, because it's really pure creatives that pull me, and that's what I've come for. So I switched tracks again. So I just overnight left my job, was jobless for about 6 months and a little more. And then writing came along as a more full-time profession a little later. Meanwhile, actually, I'd already been part of a few scripts. I wrote a film called Rahul for Mr. Prakash Jha. I was part of a cult film called Yadi by Mr. Subhash Ghai. And I was also part of a film called Supari by Mr. Padam Kumar. So I'd already done that while I was doing my jobs. And then, like I said, I quit and I was jobless for a while. I tried making my own film at that point, but it was difficult to raise finance, etc. And then somewhere along the way, around 2004, I started writing full time. And it started with television first and then switched back to films again. I've written about 17 shows. I don't remember all of them, but some of the well-known ones would be Jassi Jassi Koi Nahi. I wrote a part of the second phase of it. There was a show called Jab Love Hua for ZTV. There was something called Shararat on Star Plus, which was a children's show. Also did something called Dhoom Machao Dhoom for Disney, which was also a children's show. So like that, I basically did a lot of children, a lot of youth, and basically alternate stuff on TV, which wasn't the mainstream, the family format. Again, just like everything else in my life, coincidentally, I'd finished writing this show for Disney called Dhoom Machao Dhoom, and I was on a sabbatical, and I just decided that I'd done a lot of television and I just wanted to take a break. And I just breezed into a barista at Oshiwara one fine day, and I met my old friend Mr. Ramveer Chandani, who was at UTV that time, and who just looked at me and said, hey, why don't you come and write fashion? So I was like, I thought it's already written. And he said, no, they spent about 9 months, but the script is not there. So that's the very next day I met Mr. Madhur Bhandarkar, and the rest is history. Well, I'm really blessed to be part of so many films that have been the female protagonist, and very radical one with that. And also just lucky to be the only woman on the team, and therefore having the maximum, sort of hold on those stories. When it came to fashion, we were still trailblazers in that, because I remember having many screaming matches about the graph that the character of Priyanka Chopra went through. There was that very dramatic scene where she wakes up with a stranger in a hotel who just happened to be a black person. And I remember having a lot of arguments on that, but my whole point being that who can think of a woman's mind better than a woman? So really, I sort of stake claim on that and say that, the intricacies, the dark spaces that only a woman can go, to for a woman protagonist. So in that sense, yes, I think I end up being a bit of a torchbearer on the psyche of the woman in the films that I've been part of. Yes, I think it's extremely exciting to write of woman protagonists today. Like I was telling earlier, in fashion, of course, we were not conscious of the fact that it was going to be trailblazing and create a new sort of template in many ways. But we just went ahead because you see, for me, Priyanka in fashion was not an unknown entity. That's a girl I know. These are girls around me. These are perhaps some of my friends or just people. So that's a today's girl. So I thought that it was extremely important to bring out today's girl on screen, which of course, unfortunately, a man will always put a girl he thinks he knows on screen as opposed to a woman who knows other women around. So I think that's what became fashion's victory. And that's what became a template because it got accepted. Yes, it did pretty well for itself. It was at that point the highest grossing heroine-oriented film ever. And I think thereafter, I do believe it charted the way for something like, say, The Dirty Picture, which was of course an extremely well-made film, very different character. But the fact is that you accept a grey woman today who is not a vamp, who has her fallacies, who can fall and yet redeem herself. I think that's the template that fashion, sort of came up with. And then when I see a film like Cocktail, where I think Deepika Padukone has done a brilliant job, and then of course there's going to be Heroine, and there are several others that are coming up. I think the grey, the more human, and today's heroine is finally on screen, and I think it's extremely exciting to write more and more about her because there are so many facets to her still unexplored. My latest film is called Heroine, which is about to release on the 21st of September 2012. Where do I even begin telling you about it from? Because Heroine has been a very interesting, entertaining, exhausting journey. We started writing it in 2010, April. Where it really was in a slightly different zone. It was meant for Kareena Kapoor then. Somewhere along the way, she had some date issues, and things went to cold storage. We went on to Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, and we rewrote the script for her entirely because this was an actress who was almost a decade older. And and then, well, everybody knows what happened, and the film stalled. And then there was again a chance that the film was not going to happen at all, but somewhere we all felt so passionately for the story and the script that we said, no, we must get it made. And then lo and behold, Kareena Kapoor comes back to the film, and we rewrote it a third time to suit her. But I must say that in all of this, it has evolved into a much stronger, much more complex, much more layered script than any of the things that we've written for Mother itself earlier. And I just really hope it's going to be a good film. Well, Heroine, like most other Madhur films, always start with an idea that takes hold of him. It's always a one-line idea, but I find it very fascinating that he has really all the right ideas because he just he gets fascinated by a certain subject, and he has a take on which part of the subject he wants to explore. So when it came to Heroine post, he'd made a film called Dil To Bacha Ji, which was a very light film and different from his stuff. He came back to his forte, which is the heroine-oriented, territory. And he mentioned Heroine, and I remember meeting him one-on-one. I was the solo writer at that point. And I just asked him that which part of this excites you. And what he told me, which intrigued me no end, was that he was very interested in the last few years of an Indian heroine's career. Because it's a very interesting point, because you are right at the top, but you're almost seeing an invisible precipice that is about to come out. When it comes to Heroine, it's just steps ahead of whatever we did in fashion and whatever else that I've been working on. Because Heroine, for starters, is unlike Madhur's other films, is not an outsider who enters a system and through whose eyes we see a system. It's a far more personal journey. It isn't the exploration of the film industry like his other stuff. It is the story of an insider already. And once she's an insider and once she's already there, to make her an underdog of any kind, to have any sympathy for her, became our biggest challenge. To retain all the the various shades to her character, greys, blacks, whites, whatever, and still make her human, I think that was the biggest challenge. So my first thought while writing Heroine, which is, I told Mother as well, is that we must write it inside out. So see, that again became a slightly personal space for me, because the inside core only I as a woman would have been able to enter and understand. So the entire film was first written as an emotional graph of Mahi, played by Kareena Kapoor, and then we got into the externals of that character. So at any given time we are actually playing with her with her state of mind, which I do believe is quite new, and it's not something that we've seen too much in our cinema just yet. So yeah, I'm hoping that that's what works for it, that's what is unique about it, and that's what gives it some special layers. Yes, like I mentioned earlier, I went into a self-training on writing, because after I had written and directed my shows, which were extremely radical, very experimental, and I was just actually surprised in retrospect that they got made at all. I also felt personally as a storyteller that I was becoming a very niche storyteller. I had no way of reaching out to larger masses, and I didn't really know how to emotionally connect, which I remember Mr. Mahesh was always telling me that was my forte and I wasn't quite using it. So I felt lost for a while, and then when I went on the net, I discovered that there were a lot of professional courses that any person could do to actually learn writing, and the fact is that there is a science to it, which honestly till then was lost to me. So the first thing that really leapt out at me from a bookshelf was the book called Story by Mr. Robert McKee, and I think that just changed my life, because that till today is the Bible that I follow, the science of script writing. Once I studied and read Story, it just, the whole universe opened up to me and everything made so much sense. And I started watching a lot more movies, which is really the best way to learn, cinema, by just watching more cinema. So as Story explained cinema better to me, and having already done some work, the collective experience made more sense. And then I found many other books, lots of them which were with interviews of writers, a bit of Sid Field, which I thought was a little irrelevant by then, and just watching more films, analyzing them, and working on them on my own. So it was self-training for at least 2.5 years before I felt that I think now I know a lot more than I did before.
Plot structure, plot points, second half, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Do you follow all this?
Yes, Mazayas, to some extent I do, because like I said, I was self-trained finally in the science of writing. Yes, I believe that there is something called the science which one has studied, but more than that, I think it all comes from the dramaturgy that the Greeks discovered so many thousands of years ago. So once they have figured the graph where at each point the human mind and the human heart is going to react to something in a particular way, who might even question that? I think it's very well established. So yes, I do, but really not doggedly. I'm really not a person who gets very involved with structure. To me, structure comes in stage 2. So for me, I have to write out the entire screenplay and then start looking at its flaws and see where it's not working and start applying structure. Then I would definitely get into plot points and say, okay, that's why this is not working. And then by third draft, you kind of amalgamate your, the esoteric self and the structure self and something, and then the magic kicks in really. So yes, I'm aware, but really not over caught up with it. Yes, I think so. I'm very sure of it. Personally, I'm a huge fan of the non-linear structure. I'm a huge fan of structural experiments in storytelling, because I think that is where that is what is unique to cinema. Because you don't do that in a radio play. You can do that in a book, but somehow it's not as effective. Because I think the mental involvement with the visual medium on film is just so unique, not found anywhere else. So yes, I think non-linear films, like I said, hugely inspire me. Of course, I really think that they have to be written like that, because otherwise they just lose the plot. If you try doing it on the editing table, it'll show, it'll confuse you, it looks contrived, and it completely loses the emotion. So unless you've not written it as cleverly as it's going to be on cinema, please don't do it. My forte is really story and screenplay. I'm not so much of a dialogue writer, simply because I think I think in English. So for me, the expression of English dialogue is much easier. For Hindi, it's always a bit of a struggle, not because कि मेरी हिंदी कहीं से भी खराब है, but सिर्फ ये है कि हिंदी में सोचना एक मेरे हिसाब से एक स्पेशल कला है, and dialogue itself I think particularly in our country is a special skill, and so I would really stick to story and screenplay a lot more, and that's where I think I shine much better. I think stories just come to you from the ether. Uh, the one way I say all stories are original, or rather stories can be original, is when your entire gamut of experience churns into something, and there is that extra, sort of, I would say, an X factor that comes into it. And one fine day, through this broadband of creativity in you, it just downloads into you as a story. And then, it's an idea that takes hold of you, and it grows, and you stay with it. And soon you start realizing where and which part of your life it's coming from. And then, so, you stay with that part of your life where it's coming from, and eventually it becomes just a story and a script by itself outside of your own experience. It has a life of its own. So I think every writer has his or her own style of writing. A lot of it is very esoteric, is emotional, it's just something that brews within you. So I would like to share a bit of my style. Every time I have an idea, I first just live with it for a while. I just stay with it, I go for walks with it, I play with it, I talk to it. And at some point when I feel that it's a little more there, and it's I'm a little more pregnant with that idea, I start writing what I call freestyle essays, which is that you just write, you just pick up, and that's a pen and paper process. I always believe that. So I just start writing whatever comes to my mind about it, and through that, and without fail, I mean, it has never not happened, that I always find the core and the heart of the story in that freestyle essay, because it comes somewhere from the unconscious. Once I've centered it in a certain theme or a certain core, then I know the space of the story. Then what I call the pitch has been decided, and somewhere its universe starts forming itself. From there on, I work a lot more. I'm talking really story right now. I'm not even going to screenplay just yet. So with the story, I live with then I start working on the outline. When it starts becoming a plot, which is with the beginning, middle and end, I work on characters a lot. So I first, while the outline is still forming, I work on the character, the protagonist and characters in general, because somewhere they start defining the story. So once character and plot and therefore structure has been defined, I can then start writing the the entire story, which invariably is about 20 pages long. So once I've written the entire thing out, then that's what I would call a story being ready. The next stage would of course be the screenplay. I always take a long break from the story, because again you have to live with it, you have to refresh yourself. And I also like to watch a lot of films in that genre or in that mood before I get to the screenplay. Obviously not for inspiration of the wrong kind, but because I think your mind needs to get tuned to that emotion and that idea and just be in that state. And then starts the screenplay. I was also explained that when it comes to working with Mr. Madhur Bhandarkar over fashion, jail and heroine, it is, the screenplay particularly is a bit of a collective exercise where we actually think of things at home, and we used to come and meet as a team and throw the ideas around, and then the scenes form, and then I would go back home and form it into a fully coherent screenplay with all its nuances and all, filling in all the gaps. That process of course repeats itself many times, whether you're working on your own or in a collective, across 3 months, across 4 months. I would personally say that in the Bollywood situation, a good script should really be formed over at least 6 months. And once that is done, that's when the dialogues happen in your last draft, and then the film begins. Of course, even while it's being filmed, there could be several changes that obviously as a writer one is part of and one suggests. And then that's it. Lo and behold, the film is ready, and you watch it like a new product each time. I always get my characters from real life, because I just always believe that truth is stranger than fiction. I think that as filmmakers and particularly as storytellers, we are really just observant people who have lived a lot of I think exciting life. We have enough color in our own lives, and I think we're just mentally trained or brought up to just notice a lot more around. So therefore for me, every character is always from somebody that I have either observed or sometimes even heard of. Until I've not seen the character in my head, I cannot go further. I have to really feel and know the person on paper to, really be able to tell a story. I think story and storytelling is so closely related to life and to living, because unless you've not lived something, unless you don't have a perspective on things, unless you don't feel somehow passionately involved with society or even politics for that matter, how are you going to have a voice? So I think that's what's really happening, at least I speak for my generation, is that my generation of storytellers, filmmakers, mostly coming from outside. We're not a film family. We spent many years struggling in a different way. Nobody slept on bus stops or ate vada pav, but our struggle was of a much more mental, and the struggle was of your voice being heard and not sounding too radical, and basically not threatening the existing establishment. So I think the rediscovery is actually the rediscovery of our own selves, because we've spent, and I think just invested a lot of ourselves in this whole process. So when you rediscover yourself, when you rediscover your own passion for life and your involvement with society and the world in general, you will rediscover story. I think that's what's happening to us. You see, filmmakers are not people who are outside of society. I mean, we're not bureaucrats, or we're not ministers who've been elected from somewhere. We're just people who also watch other people's films, and just want to tell a different story from every other film that we've seen. So yes, if we are changing, which means obviously we're part of the society that's changing. And I think what's very interesting and very good today is that there is no just broad mass out there. I think there's a majority which definitely enjoys a certain kind of cinema. I would even stick my neck out to say that our national IQ from 9 has come to probably 15 and is even going towards 18. And then there is another set of audience which is at IQ 23 or 35 or then 45 as well. And I think there's cinema for everybody. Of course, the bars and the strata are thinner as we go up. But if you can make your film viable, you've got the audience.
How do you differ television writing from film writing?
But according to me, television and cinema in our country are two different universes. I don't think that's how it is meant to be worldwide, because when I see a lot of television, especially from America, where I think their television is much better than their cinema right now, I see very solid writing. I see very complex and very competent writing. Unfortunately, in television, but perhaps that's how it's meant to be, because television is the more mass medium today. It goes into households, it cuts across the country, it's a pan-Indian medium, in which case one will have to cater to the LCD, the lowest common denominator. In which case, when you're writing for television, two things: the craft itself is a little different, because you're writing episodic and you're writing across 5 days a week and across so many weeks and months. The other, I'm not sure that's entirely true, but the television channel personnel totally believe that it must be a lot slower, a lot more spelt out, and hence a lot louder. I'm not necessarily in agreement of it, because I think if you change bits of that, I think it would still work, because it's the same audience which does watch some cinema. So I think writers today in 2012 decidedly have it much better than they had, let's say, even 4 or 5 years ago. I think everybody collectively, including the audience, has woken up to the fact that there is something called a script, and that somehow a script is the most all-important factor in telling you a good story, and therefore a writer is so intrinsic and so important to the filmmaking process. And once everybody is realizing that, the importance itself is sort of growing as we speak. Unfortunately, and I have no problems in stating this right here, is that even now I would say that I think we're not given enough credit. We're definitely not faces of the film like everybody else is, and considering we are the original authors of the story, I mean, we are the people who put it from a blank page, and we are the people who put a blueprint together for everybody else to run with. I think there is a certain stage where, because we're not needed in production, you are forgotten, and you almost have to raise your voice each time to say, excuse me, I exist, and I happen to do what I did for the film. But I think, yeah, it would definitely change as we get along. I think the next generation of writers would definitely have it better than we do. No, I think the era of Salim Javed is totally over. I think it was, there was never Salim Javed before them. and I don't see one after them. It's been what, almost 30 years now. I don't think that's possible, because I think it was the amalgamation of all kinds of things that must have happened at that time, where they managed to create characters that worked for a star who then became such a big industry by himself. I don't quite see that happening today, because I think I think the situation and the system is a lot more democratic in a lot of ways. So I also don't see it being credited to one set of people, least of all the writer. I think right now perhaps a star, ironically, Salim Saab's son Salman himself, who I think holds that space today. But other than that, no. As a writer, it's the tightrope balance, because no matter what we say or what we feel, it is a business at the end of the day. And it will be very silly and stupid to be all idealistic and say, I don't care, I'm just going to write a story and I don't really care what happens to it later. I think what happens as you grow along and as you evolve, there is a certain dual sort of evolution that happens in you. So you understand commercial viability, and the struggle is to retain your idealism, which I think we've managed fairly well so far. So what you do is you manage to train your mind in a way that you think of something which is very passionate, you think of something which is the right thing to say and the right thing to do, but now you've learned the craft enough to know that this will work. And when I say this will work, it will work first effectively to the audience, and hence the commercial viability. Of course, the actual commercial viability can only be decided by the director and the producer, which is so dependent on the star to be starring in the film, which is not entirely in the writer's hands. But so therefore what I mean is that the effectiveness and how much people understand and relate to, that's the commercial viability that a writer is most aware and conscious of, and should be.
Does a film writer need to be socially conscious?
Yes, I would say that extremely strongly. Perhaps it comes from the social relevance of Jamia that one studied, or perhaps it's the upbringing. Let me put this in a different way. I go beyond social consciousness. For me, as a storyteller, I believe that stories are healing. I believe that stories are meant to reach out to people, to make them feel better in some way, and to in some way touch their lives and give them something to hold on to after they've left the film. And I think a writer without that is really doing half of his or her job. And so yes, idealism is just intrinsically part of that. If you're not looking at the higher values of life, why are you even bothering to tell a story? My message to all new writers is that please first learn the craft. Please don't think that it's just like swimming, that you just jump into the ocean and just beat your hands around and something will emerge. Please don't think that just by being radical and irreverent and just putting 5 abuses you're going to make a kick-ass script. You're not. So somewhere have the humility to learn the craft, respect story, respect storytelling, and be, if not original, I'm okay if you really have other sources that you're getting your stories from. At least be emotional, at least be honest. I think honesty is the biggest hallmark of storytelling, way more than even original is. So I would request all young writers to at least follow that. My plans for the future are like most writers in Hindi cinema, is to direct my own films, because that's the only way I think there'll be a purity of my emotion and vision that should translate onto the audiences. I am currently writing my own scripts, which I'm hoping to be able to take off the ground sometime next year. Till then, I am still quite happy and willing to write for other people. I'm currently writing some young and new directors, and I think that is keeping me quite involved, excited, and refreshing me. I think to work with youth is becoming young again yourself.